Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to, I think, a very special webinar today. I do a lot of these webinars, but very rarely do I get personally excited about them. But this one is an exception because it's a remarkable story of a multi-party collaboration that has delivered genuine results that are really remarkable when you kind of look at the bottom line. We're looking at a business that had to hire at scale in short time frame with very little preparation in the middle of a pandemic, as well as bringing together multiple support partners in order to deliver the result. And we're talking about thousands of people hired across the country, tens of thousands of man hours saved in terms of recruiter time, and all kinds of cost savings that probably have yet to be calculated. This is the story of Iceland Foods and their collaboration with Kallidus and PredictiveHire. So delighted to welcome everybody here. Make sure you fully participate in the chat. If you have any questions or anything, or comments or observations to make, please make use of the chat stream on the right of your screen, and we're going to go and interact with those as much as we can. But let's kick off. Let's start with a few introductions. We've got three guests to join us today. Let's start with you, Jeff. I think we're going to do some intros where we're going to intro each other, aren't we? So why don't you go ahead and do your intro for, I believe it was Barb or Gordon. I can't recall, Jeff.
I think, yes, it was Barb. Absolutely. So this is Barb. So Barb is the CEO from PredictiveHire. It feels weird that we've only actually known each other, Barb, for what, 8 months or something, and it feels a lot closer than that. And you know, we spent a lot of time talking over the likes of Teams and trying to accommodate those differences in the time zones that we've actually had. But Barb's made us very jealous with some of the drinks that she's had in the background, and all I've had is a cup of tea or coffee. So there you go. There's Barb.
Fantastic stuff. Barb, why don't you go ahead and introduce Gordon?
I'm actually introducing Jeff.
Are you really?
So,
all right.
Jeff is Head of Talent and Learning and Development at Iceland Foods, which is really well known for its frozen food. We didn't know about it here in Australia, but apparently everyone knows it very fondly in the UK, and particularly also for its Christmas specials. Jeff's been there for 11 years. And I think what has really struck me about Jeff is he has been really courageous, actually, in embarking on this change journey. It's not for the faint-hearted to bring in, you know, something that's as significant a change as what he's done with our technology, and obviously also with Kallidus. I think, you know, it takes a lot of leadership to lead with an organization of 30-something thousand people to make that change happen. So that's something that I really admire about him. And despite all the guitars in the background, it's not Jeff that's the talented musician. Actually, it's his son, who we're all expecting to grow up to be something quite amazing on the musical side. So that's something I learned about Jeff. And he lives in Kent, wherever that is in the UK.
Fantastic stuff. Gordon, I think we kind of might have messed up the intro side. So
I think we did.
Introduce you, man. I mean, I'd love to do it, but I think you should go ahead and give yourself like 60 seconds to describe who you are, what do you do, and how it interfaces with these other two businesses here.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I'm Gordon. I'm the commercial product manager for Kallidus and our Kallidus Recruit product. And we've been working with Iceland now for probably about the last kind of, I'd say, coming up to probably 4 or 5 years, I think it is at the moment. Yeah, sort of taken them on a bit of a journey in terms of kind of replacing an ATS and then kind of rolling out to their stores a couple of years ago, which has been a really interesting experience. My background is recruitment, so I once upon a time was a recruiter and then moved into kind of online recruitment, so candidate attraction, and then very much focused now on our product from a product perspective.
Fantastic stuff. Well, thanks for the intros, folks. These are the three people that we're going to have a conversation with over the next 45 minutes or so. And we're talking about this collaboration that the three of your businesses got involved in as the crisis of last year really emerged. Let me take it over to you firstly, Jeff. COVID-19 hit everyone extraordinarily hard, but probably no business sector was impacted outside of public healthcare. I would imagine no other business sector was more impacted than food retail. Can you describe sort of the situation, before, as we were kind of moving into the pandemic? What was the scenario there when you began to realize, hang about, business as usual in terms of how we were operating as a business, as a recruiting function, that isn't going to fly with regards to the demands that we're having to staff up?
Yeah, I mean, as we were going through and the pandemic was starting to hit us within the UK in March, we were very clearly starting to see that the challenges within the business around the buying that was actually happening, the levels of panic buying, unfortunately, that we had within the business, really meant that we had to significantly increase our staff very quickly. And then when we went into full lockdown, there was a reaction within the UK, and with the fact that food retail was one of the only types of retail that was allowed open in that very first stage of the pandemic, a lot of business came our way, and we were experiencing highs within our business that were above our standard Christmas trading. So it meant a significant jump in terms of the amount of people that we were actually requiring. So we needed to be in a place of recruiting people very, very quickly. And certainly over those first 8 weeks, we had to take away all of that recruitment from our store managers to allow them to manage the stores, deal with the customers, making sure that they were getting the products that they were wanting, and actually centralize that recruitment for a certain period of time to enable us to get the levels of staffing on board.
Okay, so that's a really interesting moment that's worth bearing in mind. Maybe the first significant move that was made internally was that you had to change a distributed way of recruiting. So I understand that, meaning the individual store managers had responsibility for hiring for their store, but you had to change that because that wasn't scaling. The managers themselves obviously completely crushed in terms of their own sort of needing to manage the pandemic and manage public health and all that type of stuff. How did you kind of pull that in? I mean, what does that mean operationally?
I mean, basically what it meant was our internal recruitment team that we had to take over all of the recruitment from a very specific date. And therefore, any of the applications that were actually coming in, any of the sifting and the basic recruitment process that we were going through had to be conducted through our internal team, which, was a big challenge for us. Over those first 8 weeks of that pandemic, we received just shy of 300,000 applications, and it always makes me laugh, but we managed to actually break Gordon's systems.
He did, unfortunately.
He wasn't a happy bunny with us at some points, I tell you now.
Was that the first stress test, Gordon, where never before had you encountered that volume of applicants?
I think on one day it got to 30,000 applications or 38,000 applications just in a single day on there. So I know my technical team were kind of on the phone to me, kind of, wow, this is crazy. It all hands on deck to ensure that the system stayed up, worked, and when it went down, it literally was for, I think, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes whilst they were in the background kind of scurrying to get the performance up and things. And that continued. I mean, those levels were, we had never seen anything like that before. So it really was, an experience for all of us. And thankfully, once we got the initial kind of teething out the way, it was a much smoother process.
let's remind the audience what was happening, because it's incredible. It's like nearly 3 months, 12 months ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But who were these applicants? Like, why were they applying at such volume? What's the context of all of that? Remind us on this, Jeff.
Yeah, so, we recognized that we were needing to get some additional people actually on board, and we did some basic resourcing planning around that. That planning went out the window very quickly, to be honest with you. But we did a big recruitment campaign that was built on the tagline of helping to feed the nation. And we went out there, we delivered that campaign, delivered it exceptionally well. And that was through social media, it was through the relevant job platforms, it was also advertising in stores, which we'd stopped doing as well. And that's where a lot of it was coming through. And initially we were anticipating getting circa 4,000 to 6,000 applications over those first few days when we were starting off that particular campaign. Actually, in that first week, we had received 120,000 applications. We were going anything, certainly in those first couple of days, we'd hit between 25 and 30,000 applications in those first couple of days, and that just didn't stop.
That's just crazy numbers, isn't it? And again, just to remind everybody, this is the point where lots of people were very concerned about their own job security. They were coming out, I guess, from travel, from hospitality, from different sectors that essentially were shut down and not able to operate. Lots of flexible labor as well were hammered at that time. So supermarkets and grocers and whatnot became almost like the lodestone, attracting all of these people through. And when you get that type of increase, my maths would even tell me that it's more than like 1,000% increase. That existing systems are not going to cope. It's like a plumbing system, isn't it? Like it's like running a swimming pool's worth of water when all you wanted to do was to brush your teeth. That system is going to break. When all of this deluge was coming at you, Jeff, when did you think, okay, we need to actually control and probably handle this applicant flow? And I guess this is where you end up bringing Barb's team, PredictiveHire, to do that, and her technology was critical in order to not only manage the flow, but to make sure the candidate experience was at a high level, maybe even improved from previous, but to make sure that was basically controlled. Again, for some reason, I'm thinking plumbing kind of metaphor now, and it's like you plug something into the hose pipe in order to control the flow, and it doesn't matter whether you've got like a reservoir behind it, because you've controlled the flow in such a way that you can actually operate properly. When did you realize technology was required, Jeff? And how did it happen that you chose PredictiveHire in the end?
For us, over that particular period of time, to be honest with you, our concentration had to be getting people on board. It had to be ensuring that our stores were still able to operate, and more importantly, people were still able to get their essential supplies from us. So we very much concentrated on that, and that meant that over that first 8 weeks, we actually recruited 5,500 people during that time. But once we were getting towards the end of that, once things were starting to slow, there was then that conversation that was then going, if we get a second surge of this within the country, we cannot afford to go through this again. We cannot afford to use our resources in that way. There must be a more simplified and more easier way to actually do this. And that's where we then started looking into what were some of those alternatives that could help us to do that sifting before, or do that system sifting using some sort of technology in some sort of way. That was the best way in which we could actually do it, and taking the human part out of it at that beginning stage. And that's where we started looking into some of those external platforms and started to search around as to who was good. And we'd heard about PredictiveHire from Gordon, actually. So, you know, we picked up with Gordon. We work together very closely between Kallidus and Iceland. And, you know, a lot of our recruitment challenges, we openly share with Kallidus to go through and say, so come on then, give us some of your experience, give us some of your thoughts around what's actually happening. And Gordon said, look, there's a new product in town. It's called PredictiveHire. We've heard about it. One of our people are thinking about working with them. So why don't you have a look at that? And that's where I then got in contact with Barb at that particular stage and just said, look, come on, tell us about your product. So we had a look at a variety of different products and narrowed it down to two, really. One was PredictiveHire and another one was based on SJTs.
Yep. Fantastic. And Bob, before we go to you on this, I just wanted to understand sort of, there's like zillions of different assessment tooling, isn't there? Video interviewing, there's like gamified testing, there's all kinds of different ways in which, you know, companies are trying to solve this applicant flow problem, you know, get better, I guess, at hiring more accurately, effectively, but also handling the volume. Why did you go with this category of solution? Because PredictiveHire is fundamentally a conversational assessment tool, isn't it? So why did you go for that instead of, let's say, a video tech type of solution?
You know, ultimately, I think it's a very human experience, recruitment, and I think applying for a job is really hard. And there are a lot of people there who are really desperately seeking employment. And so when you think about, you know, the reality of recruitment, the abyss, the black box of applying for a job and hearing nothing back, of doing assessments that you don't quite understand why they're asking those questions and you feel intimidated by them. You know, we wanted to create something that was genuinely inclusive and that could work for everyone and that really dignified the recruitment experience. And so we chose chat because everyone has a phone. People chat with their friends and family. They feel safe. They feel comfortable. It's blind. And, you know, we work in this space of high volume where you're tapping into the whole universe of talent, you know, 14-year-olds and 75-year-olds and people with English as a second language and people with neurodiverse challenges. And we wanted it to work for everyone. And we felt that that was the best formula to do that.
Here's the lesson for you folks. Basically, everyone has a mobile phone. I think there's something like 7 billion mobile devices that are smart devices on the planet, but not everyone has a laptop. So when you're talking about video technology, like the stuff I'm doing, everyone here is watching on, you're using a 1,000-pound type device in order to conduct your work. There's many people that simply do not have this device, but almost everyone has a mobile a phone that is able to support chat. So if you are hiring at scale and for a diverse workforce, for different types of people that are not just white collar workers, then actually you need a solution that's you know, compatible with the native use of this of this technology. People who interact with PredictiveHire basically are simply chatting through it. They're not having to set up into a studio, get some lighting on and like shooting a video, right? So suddenly it becomes instantly more accessible to everyone that's out there. Okay, cool. This seems like a big deal in terms of a business size, Bob. I mean, when Gordon first, or was it Jeff that reached out to you and said, hey, you know, we're hiring tens of thousands of people. We think your product might be a fit. What was your thought process at that time? Was it like, yeah, this is the moment? Or were you like a little bit worried to think, hang on, this may be a bit too big?
How you felt? Come on, Bob.
Incredibly exciting. So look, it was a, you know, we're a small team, right? We've been around for 3 years. We work with some incredible consumer brands like Qantas. So we're used to working with, you know, mature, sophisticated businesses. But I'll be honest, this was our really first huge opportunity in the UK, and you know, it was really competitive. Jeff put us through pretty intense comparative testing. He had a team internally who were testing both products. He asked lots of great questions. He really probed deeply on the data and the science and how does this work. And obviously you've got GDPR as well, which is a whole extra level of, you know, complexity and compliance that's required. So, you know, we had to kind of level up, right, to really deliver to their expectations. And, you know, I still remember when Jeff announced and shared with me over video that he had selected our tool, and I was pumped as, and then I called the whole team together and I said, guess what, we got it. You know, it's one of those pivotal moments in the life of a young team. So it was a really big step for us, and clearly the data volumes are, you know, larger than anything we've experienced. I'll say that we haven't dropped a beat on that. You know, we've never had a challenge around dropout in terms of outages, and you know, our technology is really built for scale. So that was pretty exciting. So yeah, it was a great turning point for us.
That's a fantastic. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just going to say, I think if I understand correctly, Barb, I think we're probably one of your biggest clients globally now. And certainly, you know, when we were talking about some of those initial numbers, and on average, you know, our applications were coming through at 500,000 applications a year, and you know, your eyes lit up at that particular step. And yet by the end of this year, or this financial year, you know, we will have had 1.6 million applications. And as you said, you know, we haven't had a single complaint at all about what has happened with PredictiveHire and how that system's operated.
That's fantastic result. I mean, the test of any product is the ability to scale it out in that way. And oftentimes, you know, you do need to have that one big demonstration of, you know, product fit. And it's a great moment for any company that's building software to solve these very hard problems, that you get the opportunity to do this. The multi-party aspect I want to explore here, because it's not just PredictiveHire into Iceland Foods. You got to deal with Kallidus, the core ATS platform, that is, you know, the operating system, if you like, of how recruiting operates within Iceland. Tell us a little bit about that relationship, Bob. I mean, did you understand this product? How do you go about integrating it? What kind of work was involved to make sure there was a seamless kind of connection between you and another software provider?
Yeah. Look, I mean, for a business of the scale of Jeff, and for all of our clients, integration is a dependency. You know, if you can't integrate, there's no opportunity. And so for us, building a trusted partnership and really creating a partnership was critical from day one. We have an amazing team of engineers. We have a sub team within our engineering team who we call the integration warriors, who literally just do integrations. We've done about 10, and, you know, they have, you know, very sharp views on different systems, right? We could probably leverage their expertise to give advice in market about which systems you should think about integrating with, because they really examine the code base. And I think for them, you know, Kallidus really stood out as a really, apart from the collaborative side, which was very straightforward and very open and trusting, it was really about the technology. It was very sophisticated and very mature, and the API was a very simple, straightforward technology to integrate with. And that makes a huge difference to everyone. So, you know, there's really a kind of a tripartite relationship going on between the technical team, but integration also involves product design, right? You've got to look at what's the user journey look like for the candidate as well as the hiring manager. And they really teamed our team, Kallidus and Iceland, to make sure that that was being optimized. You know, this isn't a technology you just add to your stack. You know, you have to reimagine, how do you optimize that experience that takes advantage of what technology like ours offers? So, you know, it's quite a significant shift and evolution of your recruitment process for everyone who's touching it. And you have to work together. So, you know, lots of late night calls for our team, but they were incredibly positive and, you know, highly rated, the Kallidus technology stacks, for anyone who's thinking about moving to a new ATS.
That's a really good observation. Two things I want to touch on here, folks. Firstly, you know, whenever you're looking at buying software, particularly core software, you've got to kind of be conscious of how does it interact or speak to other bits of technology that you will inevitably need to use if you're going through this journey. Like, we know already that the only thing we can predict is that it's going to be a very chaotic and unpredictable several years going forward. It makes no sense for you to have a system that doesn't have the ability to flex around and connect with other things. So that's a primary concern, I think, for anybody who is looking at ATS software or core products of that type. And secondly, Bob, you mentioned that this idea that, you know what, the relationship between the partners is critically important. Even if technically it might be plug and play, we can't get away from the fact that you need to build relationships between these people who work in different companies in order for us to affect a successful end game. Open question to all three of you. What was the what made that partnership work in this context? Like, why was this one of those that actually worked out? Because I'm sure there's going to be examples in your mind right now to think, yeah, there was another one. There's another customer I dealt with there, and we had a partnership and it didn't work. So what can we learn from successful partnerships between multiple vendors who work for different businesses? Thoughts on this?
Yeah, I suppose from our perspective, I think we brought all the key people to the table really early on. So I think just when the conversations were starting between Jeff and Barb, they were involving us and saying, look, here's what we're looking at. Can we understand? And they were very Barb was very forthcoming about, like, let's get talking, let's understand the technology, let's see what the task at hand is going to be here. And I think we all just headed off right from the get-go, really, in terms of we all were on this journey with Iceland in terms of what was happening. We knew we needed to find a better way of doing things, and PredictiveHire offered us an opportunity to understand that AI and how that's being used in recruitment more, and what that could do, not just for Iceland but for other customers. And we're seeing this happen more and more. People a few years ago were talking about integrating, but it often didn't cross the line. Now it's almost just common practice, right? We need to, have the integration with the HRIS. We need to integrate these testing tools, and it's happening more and more frequently now.
Any other thoughts from you, Jeff? Why did this partnership in particular work out where others perhaps might not have done?
I think one of the key aspects that we also looked at as well, and certainly know from my previous experience when we've looked at external suppliers and said, right, who should we be working with? I think previously what's happened, you've looked at the external suppliers and said, who is right in terms of cost for our budget? Who is right in terms of what the product can actually deliver? But actually a huge part of our decision making was about who can we really feel confident about working with, and where was the cultural fit within there. And actually, everything that we embodied as a business in terms of our cultural fit, how we operated. So at pace, very informal as to the way in which we do things, but everyone knows exactly what they need to be doing and where they need to be heading. We absolutely saw that through Barb, Nick, and the rest of the team at PredictiveHire that said, they feel like they're Iceland people. And actually that was really, really important to us. And therefore, all of those times where, certainly in my experience previously, when I've dealt with suppliers, it's like, well, how do they work? And how do they work? And how do they like things? And okay, they're going to need to do it like this and going to need to do it like that. All of that cultural fit, all of that bureaucracy that normally is created right at the beginning of a partnership, in terms of understanding how each other operated as they went through, we didn't need to do that. And that was a real fundamental. And actually for us, and I remember the conversation with Barb and Nick, the COO, that was going, we want this in 4 weeks. And, they looked at us and went, okay, yeah, we can do that. Now, we managed to get it in 6. And that was a lot due to the delay on our own internal systems within Iceland. And it wasn't a delay by any means in terms of either PredictiveHire or Kallidus, but that was such a fundamental to us, was about the cultural fit. And it was about going, we understand each other from the get-go. And, we base so much of our working with suppliers on now in terms of the relationships. And that's what I challenge my team with, is going, are they a PredictiveHire? Could we work with them like we work with PredictiveHire and how we work with Kallidus? Because we've had this level of relationship with Kallidus as well over the past 4 years in exactly the same way. Gordon might as well be a member of the Iceland team. Well, for the amount we keep bringing him up anyway. Anyway, but that's how we operated, and that's how it genuinely felt.
Okay, I'm going to sit on this insight just a little bit, guys, because I think it's really, really important, quite very, very interesting also, because it's not only about the technical integration, but the cultural integration between the partners that are involved. You can have a technical solution that's absolutely perfect, but for whatever reason, if the people are not integrating, that's not going to work out for us. And you mentioned already like a few things, like your self-awareness of what the Iceland culture is. It's huge organization, but it operates still in a very informal first sort of method. It's not necessarily one that is all about procedural type, this document here, that document there. It's about being able to kind of understand each other's work and move forward. Maybe this actually feels a little bit like a software company in the modern sense, where it's basically results over procedure, and your self-awareness that that's part of what Iceland is, I think, is an important part for you to identify these different types of providers. So maybe a lesson here for the folks out there when you're looking at external solutions, that you need to have a cultural awareness of your own business. Like, how do you do things? Because if you don't have that, you don't even know who your best partner is. You just be shooting blind, or probably doing the worst thing, which is, looking at the top 3 in this quadrant or whatever, and just buying whatever the name brand service that makes you feel most comfortable. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how this culture can be surfaced. So you mentioned informality was one of those things. How do you know someone's informal? Everyone's going to be friendly on camera. You're gonna you're gonna get your best salesperson up there. They know how to do the rapport bit. So how do you know? Okay, I get it. Gordon can, Kallidus can work in this type of agile way. Go to you, Jeff, on that.
Okay, sorry, my apologies. So how do we know that?
Could just be a good thing. I mean, I know there's a little bit of a trend away from the idea of cultural fit in a recruiting context, because we feel like, hey, isn't that just going with your gut? And are you not just ending up hiring people that look like you and think like you, and etc. may not be a good thing? Barbara, you about to say something?
Yeah. So look, so the way I think about it is, my background is in HR. And when I was in the head of HR role, so much of what you're trying to do is create this culture of trust, within your organization, with your peers, with your team, with the whole employee base. And, that really is about shared values, and really embedding those values in the way you make decisions. And I think every relationship is about shared values, whether it's a candidate applying for a job, and whether it's, Jeff choosing a vendor that he wants to partner with. And, I think that was something that came through really early, which is we both valued the same things. We're a technology that's about leading with the human experience. And even now, when I take to Jeff our product roadmap and say, here's another piece that we're looking at doing, if it in any way compromises the human experience, Jeff sort of puts his hand up and goes, okay, I need to really think about that, because that's something that's so deeply embedded in our culture. And one thing that was so important to him is, the only way he would have gone forward with this is if it actually made it better for candidates. If there was any risk that people would feel unsafe or intimidated or annoyed at the fact that this technology was having a conversation with them, it would not have worked. And so I think, our whole foundation is about trust, because we know that when you bring in change, it takes an enormous amount of trust in us, trust in the technology. Jeff's using his brand of trust to drive that change. Like, we don't celebrate when the deal's done. We celebrate when we see it go live and it working for our client. Trust is sort of the anchor of everything that you're really building here. And I just think that that came from sort of shared values around humanity first, which is part Iceland, but also, core to our product.
You know what? Thank you very much for that, Bob. Every time you say something, you kind of open up not one but 2 things I want to talk about. So the 2 things I think that Bob shared there that are super important was this idea that they're like axiomatic values associated with your business. So this is not just marketing literature that you put out there and say, hey, we're this business now. It's like axioms mean that you stand by those values irrespective of whether you fail or not as a business. It's like, that's the test. You know, no matter what happens, this is the value. And Jeff, I read the case study again, just sort of prior to this call. And one of your recommendations actually was that you need to articulate those values, like be clear on what the axioms are. And you need to tell people this is what it is. And I think that declaration of what those values are publicly can help orientate your decision making, can't they? Because as Bob mentioned, if there was a compromise on candidate experience, we're not going to go ahead with this implementation. That needed to be a non-negotiable, I think was the terminology. By the way, folks, I'm going to share the case study in the chat. In fact, if one of the PredictiveHire team are on here and they want to share a link to that case study, I highly recommend people read it. Please share it in the chat now. And I think people should totally take a look at it. Tell us about this idea of candidate first approach when you're hiring, because I think if I was you, I've got to be honest, hands up, if I was confronted with a situation where suddenly I was dealing with like 500,000 applicants, I'm saying, okay, how do I process, how do I manage admin load? That would be my primary concern. So I would de-escalate the candidate experience. But that's why I'm not a professional recruiter anymore. That'd be fine. But from your side, how did you understand that this was critically important to the success of this implementation, Jeff?
Look, candidate experience has always been there for me, and I think, you know, we've had challenges all the way through, and I think if you are an individual who is looking for a role, you know, that's a hard thing to do, whether it's because you've lost a job previously, whether it's because you genuinely want to move a job, whether that be for upwards movement, for promotion, or whether you're genuinely unhappy within a job. You know, it's key. You know, those people are spending a considerable amount of time actually doing that. And what we've got to do is we've got to give something back. You know, there can be nothing more disheartening to individuals who are going through, particularly at this time when within the UK, and I'm sure many countries around the world where unemployment is going up, it's, you know, forecasted to still go up and potentially up to about 3 million people. And there'll be many people looking at that market. And actually, you know, they've taken the time out to consider Iceland as a business. They've taken the time out to research Iceland as a business and want to actually work there. And the least that we can do is show them, A, what it could be like to work for Iceland, and B, actually show them the respect of them spending that time and going through and applying with us. And, you know, that was key to us in terms of how we actually interacted with them. And certainly, you know, a lot of the feedback that actually comes through clearly shows that people then have a clear flavor as to what the Iceland culture is about. Talk about how much they feel as though Iceland cares about them as individuals and makes them better as individuals. And actually, that's our return. Because it doesn't matter where you get to in terms of that application process. And, you know, we did the work with Kallidus, and basically we turned the whole system on its head, didn't we, Gordon, in terms of how we were going through and applying. And we turned the whole system on its head to put the PredictiveHire work right at the very beginning. So, you know, people only answer 3 questions and then they go into the PredictiveHire work straight after that. They don't even fill out names, addresses, or anything like that. You know, so we then know for every single person who has applied with us, you know, they then get that personalized report that goes back to them, that talks about what their strengths are, talks about what their you know, some of the coaching tips for them in order to help them to improve their prospects should they not be successful with Iceland. But, you know, the feedback that we get from that is absolutely fantastic. You know, the customer satisfaction ratings are off the scale, and also it has some of those bigger impacts as well. And when you start talking about, and please excuse me for not knowing the direct figures straight now, Barb, I'm sure you'll be able to tell us, but it's around 75% of all the applicants feel more confident and happier in themselves as a result of going through that process. You know, it's I think it's 54% of candidates say that they are more likely to shop in an Iceland store as a result of this experience. So, you know, those tangible elements that then come through after that in terms of the increase in trade. But more importantly for us as well, it's around about 70% of all the applicants said they're more likely to recommend Iceland as an employer because of the experience that they went through. That's why it's so key to us. That's why it was so important to us. We wanted people to feel great out of this and get something back.
That's amazing, Jeff. And Bob, I'm going to go to you in a second to better understand why this is such an impressive experience. But bear in mind, folks, before we do that, just imagine how the candidate experience has kind of evolved. I mean, step number one was the black hole. You simply see a job, you apply for it, you never hear back. That was the standard default experience for very, very many years. And sadly enough, I think it's still a common experience in many, many cases. So in other words, you don't actually know what's happened to your application, whether it's been received or not, considered or not, proceeded or not, rejected or not. You simply have no clue. And you have to assume if they don't contact you, then yeah, I'm probably not successful. That got marginally better by people putting a caveat saying, hey, if you don't hear from us, yeah, consider it not successful. So at least they'll tell you, okay, if I'm not hearing in 2 weeks or so, whatever the arbitrary deadline is, I can move on with my life. I can ignore this. Very incremental improvement. Third level of improvement was the auto reject email, right? And I think the majority of the market is still in auto reject. Let me know, folks, if you're using some sort of software and you're rejecting candidates, are you cranking out an auto reject email to this person, say, thank you for your application. You haven't been successful this time. Please try again later, or give them something else to say or whatnot. I think that itself is a massive improvement. But the next level evolution to this is what you're talking about, Jeff, which is personalized feedback for every applicant. So this is not only an automatically generated, but is generated and customized based on this candidate's input into the process. So you can actually give some useful information for this person rather than all of this kind of generic material. Bob, let's go to you. Explain to us what that candidate experience flow is. What is the user journey when they apply for a job with your technology behind it?
So they go on a mobile phone. About 70% of people do it on a mobile phone, and they answer 5 questions that you would ask in an interview, questions that are really relatable, engaging, questions that you can respond to as a candidate in your own voice. I think when you look at candidate experience in the past, SJT, multi-choice, psychometric, games, you don't really get to share who you are in a very human way. It doesn't feel like an interview. And we wanted to really create an experience that very much mirrored the interview experience. And so, people love being able to tell their story, and then the second part is, in the early days, obviously our job was to serve the needs of the Iceland and the Qantas, et cetera, which is how do we help you identify of all of those thousands who are the best people for the job. And so people are given a recommended score, and there's a profile that you can look at behind each score, which gives you further insights. And we started to think about, well, there's so much asymmetry in recruitment. I think it's a hard job for recruiters finding the needle in the haystack. It's even harder for the job seekers to find the right job. How do we remove that asymmetry? Like, why do organizations not give something back? And so we had the science to be able to do that. So we built our second product, which is what we call My Insights, which means that as soon as you submit and you've done your 5 questions, whether you get the job or not, you receive this email that says, hey, hon, we've learned some things about you. We hope it'll help you, let us know what you think. And people are shocked. Firstly, they expect to get nothing. And then they also expect to get something that just isn't right or isn't constructive. But we've also written it in such a way that it's like your mum or dad or your football coach giving you feedback. Again, it's about the human experience. And it says things like, if you're an introvert, what we say is not that you're an introvert. What we say is, hon, you've got a voice that deserves to be heard. Lean in meetings and really share what you think. So you're really coaching, you know, you're really engaging with people in a very human way. And I think that's what's really had the impact. So it is totally like when we speak to Iceland about 500,000 applicants in 6 months, for us, it's all about imagine the difference we're making to another 500,000 people. Like 500,000 people that do nothing really, that are applying for 20 jobs, you know, that might get one job if they're lucky. So for us, it's like, you know, we feel like we're doing a public service, helping people understand themselves, and everyone craves feedback, right? People want to know like more about themselves and want to learn how they can get better. So, you know, there's a lot of gratitude that comes through those feedback comments, and that you know, that feels pretty rewarding.
Okay, so that's excellent, Bob. I'm going to just interrupt very quickly because there's I think a very important point as to the timing of the delivery of the report is before a decision is made.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's not like, oh, by the way, Gordon, you've failed in the job. Here's a bit of feedback. Straight away, your first thing you're thinking is, oh my God, I'm so disappointed. I've lost this opportunity. And your attention or your interest in this feedback is going to be damaged as a result. But you're saying, Bob, in your system, the feedback is generated immediately before a decision is made. So that I'm thinking,
right.
oh, great. Yeah.
And I think that was a conscious decision about where we placed it in the process. So that's why it was right up front, because when we discuss what is this candidate workflow, what is the candidate experience going to be, we wanted to put that kind of front and center. And once they get that and they get that really positive outcome, they then, you know, continue with the other information, which is also really critical to the business for Iceland from an operational perspective, to kind of bring them into the organization smoothly as well. So you need to kind of give them that great kind of experience up front to help the rest of the process move smoothly as well.
Can I just say one thing, folks, for the recruiters who are still operating recruiters or managing operating recruiters? I think the idea of delivering feedback before decisions are made should be something we do on a mandatory basis. So think about the information when you're interviewing candidates or you're doing a Zoom call of some type. Don't save the feedback until after the decision. You need to give that feedback straight away because that person is going to be much more receptive to feedback before you've made the call on it. And I think that's just a quick habit shift that we can make. And as you mentioned, Bob, it will really help people's morale and help them perform better in future interviews. Like one of the worst things I think that can happen, I've spent a long time unemployed. When I was young, I was 18 months out of work. And I now looking back on it, I could monitor sort of my own morale, and I was getting smaller as a person every single day I was unemployed. Smaller, the world was smaller, my targets were smaller, everything was smaller. And I realized until I pulled out of that, thankfully I pulled out of that spiral, but there's going to be lots of people that never do that. So we need to do our bit as recruiters, as technology providers in the recruiting space, to understand how human psychology works, and also to provide the ability for this person to constantly manage their morale in a northeast direction. Bob, staying with you on this, because I'm fascinated about how you generate the report. So as I understand this, I'm going through the system. By the way, there's a great video on this. So if one of the team could share the video, a link to the Vimeo in the chat, that would be great. People should watch that. But I'm applying for Iceland, and I'm like chat responding to this, right? How do you know what I'm, the content of my chat is enough for your system to tell me about my personality? Is that right?
Yeah. Look, that's the innovation, and there's only one other company in the world that has built that ability to extract meaning in terms of who you are, your behaviors, your traits, which is IBM Watson, and they've been around for 10 years or so. I think everyone knows who they are. They don't sell their product in the same way that we do, but it's really the invention of our data science team, who are amazing, who have experimented over the last 2 years to identify what can you learn from people's words. And so what we have is this incredible decisioning engine, which has about 200 million words in it, which is doubling every few months. And from that, we discover that words have meaning. And when you think about the history of all psychometric testing, it all rests in language and natural language. When you think about us as recruiters and we're asking questions, tell us about what motivates you, we're listening to that response and we're making judgments about, does that sound like someone who's really driven? Does that sound like someone who's got high humility? It's just that machines can process many more millions of data points much more quickly than we can as humans, and obviously without all of those biases. So it's natural language processing is the actual core technology, and combined with, you know, the incredible data engine that we've built and really the invention of our data science team. And I think something that we also feel really strongly about, because we're obviously an AI tool, is, you know, again, this comes back to our philosophy of trust, right? Like, you know, Iceland's not going to trust us if we can't really legitimate, you know, our technology and our science. We've really invented a new science, a combination between personality science and data science, and we've published that. We've had our research peer reviewed and published, and anyone can look that up on IEEE. And Tony, you can give a link to that as well. And we think that's really important, you know, you've got to be able to trust the technology that you're using as well as the organization that you're working with. And, you know, it's kind of, we're at the frontier of something really amazing, being able to discover who people are from the words that they write.
Two things, Bob. I'm sorry to lean. Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
What I was just going to say was, I just wanted to share, I've just pulled up on the other screen some feedback from applicants that have actually gone through. So I just want to back up some of the stuff that Barb's saying there. So the very first one that is on there, thank you so much for the valuable feedback. I've got to know about my strengths, which would help me to grow in my career as well as personally. Really appreciate it. Another one that's two down from it. Wow, I'm amazed how just after those few questions you are spot on. I'll take everything on board, thanks. And that's the sort of thing that really drove us in terms of the decision making around this, you know, to get that sort of feedback from individuals and to understand how it is changing people's lives. I mean, some of the comments, Barbs, that you and I have seen in there and talking about, you know, how low they were in terms of confidence, but actually just by getting this report, it shows that there's something there that they shouldn't forget. You know, we get really emotional statements like that. That's the whole beauty of it.
That's you know, that's the feedback that really matters, like the people who don't get the jobs. Part of the problem I find when you see sort of people report on NPS scores and stuff like this is like, who are you actually collecting that from? Someone who you're collecting who's got the job already, or they're mid-process, of course they're going to you know, rate it as a certain number. And the people who get rejected, of course they're going to have the sting of that disappointment, and they'll moderate their report subconsciously, even they'll moderate it in this way. But the information I think you're getting from these candidates it seems to be, even the rejected candidates are going forward to say, you know what, Iceland Foods is a business that's worth investigating. And again, for those companies that are thinking about buying software, your brand via the vendors are totally associated. They're going to think about Iceland. They're not going to think about PredictiveHire, right? The candidate experience is all Iceland all the way through. Kallidus, PredictiveHire in the background. They're not going to care too much about the brand of the technology. They're just going to care about the experience that they've received from the big brand of the business that they're applying to. Okay, very, very good. Okay, I've just noticed that time is like flying by, folks. So I want us to move on to the next thing, which is essentially, you know, what are the big learnings from this collaboration? There's lots of things that we need to think about in terms of how this worked best, what actually didn't work. So let's start off with this. Like, what is the one thing, if you could rewind time, you know, back 12 months or however long it was, what's the one thing that you as a partner in this, you think you could have actually done better? And then I'll ask the reverse question, is what is the one thing that you could give to the audience as a takeaway if they're in the position that you were in 12 months ago? Let's go with you firstly on that, Bob. The thing that you could have done as one of the primary vendors in this thing that you think, yeah, probably this I could have done better.
Gosh, I think that one thing we're learning as a young company is, as we go through different integrations, some of them are better designed than others to optimize both the candidate experience and the recruiter journey. And I think one thing we can do better as a business is to collate our experience on that and really define the ultimate, you know, journey and bring that to the table. You know, reality is some systems don't have a lot of flexibility in what they're able to do, but, you know, people are now looking to us to say, what is the best candidate experience? What is the most seamless, efficient hiring manager experience? Is, you know, how do we push the likes of a Kallidus or any other system that we work with to go, can you deliver to that? Right? You know, often we just accept the limitations, and I'm not saying this was the case with Kallidus, but we work with others, and I'll say Workday is one like this, where it's really quite limited as to what you can do. And so I think us really leading in on the best integration experience possible, and, you know, then trying to work towards that, maybe not initially, but over time. I probably would like us to do that more when we're starting to engage with, you know, really large businesses.
That's it. I think a common scenario when you're a young and up and coming business is oftentimes you're a bit intimidated by these, you know, huge monoliths that have been around forever, and you want to adapt to everything they do. But perhaps there's a reason why, you know, you've taken a lead in this emerging categories, because they've not been able to go there. And the new discoveries you're making, these are valuable things that you need to bring to the table.
I think we're becoming topic experts now, and so we should offer that expertise, you know, generously and proactively when we're talking to customers.
Exactly right. How about you, Gordon? Looking back on it, one thing that you could have done better?
Yeah, I think we probably underestimated the impact of that volume on the system. Certainly, even with the predictive hire side of things, the number of applications coming through and the strains on the technology. And I guess, you know, we did have some challenges initially whilst we're going through some kind of initial testing. I think it was great how, you know, everyone came to the table and was discussing these issues openly, like, okay, so, you know, if this happens, you know, is it something that you can do to change on your side? Can we change things on our side? And that was the end of it. It's like, how can we carry on moving it forward and getting it to work better?
Yeah, I think we lost like the last 30 seconds, 10 seconds of what you said, Gordon. But I think I know what, I think the audience has got the message. It's essentially, sorry for the background noise on my side now, actually. I hope you don't hear the roadworks. The roadworks are blasting away. Let's mute me very quickly. Jeff, let's go to you. The thing that you could have done better looking back on it.
I think for me, there's a couple of things I wanted to point out. One is actually for me, this has probably been one of the smoothest projects that I've ever worked on. This for me has created a blueprint for how we should be operating, certainly within HR and overall within Iceland in terms of any form of project implementation within that. I think the thing for me that is has been a watch out has been actually with how well the project was going at the particular point in time. There was a real level of energy and excitement, and what that did cause was a level of project creep from my end. Let's go. So could we do this and could we do that and what about this and what about that? And that's where it went, and it was getting to the point of then, okay, we're biting off more than we can chew. And actually, you know, that was some of the challenges for us internally, was where I was wanting to do more with it. You know, the IT team wasn't available to do that, and so that was the learning for me, was don't get swept away by the excitement of what's actually happening. Keep focused on what is needing to be delivered.
You know what, and that's actually a really good segue to the final thing we want to talk about, which is what is next. I mean, I think all three of you seem to have really been enriched as a result of the relationship that you've had together. What's sort of down the pipeline? I mean, cross fingers, the COVID-19 pandemic is hopefully getting under control. It will be at some point. Maybe there is some sort of return to normal of some type. What does that mean for the technology integrations that you've done, the partnerships that you've got there? What's down the pipeline that you see? Let's go to you on this, Bob.
So look, obviously, now that we've integrated with Kallidus and we love their system, we'd love to have more of Kallidus's customers taking advantage of our tech. So we're hoping that that will happen. And I think, you know, for us as a young company, again, you know, part of, I think, what excited Jeff was that you're not partnering with a kind of a behemoth technology company that's designed as tech and that's it. You know, we're very much building the next version of our product with our customers. So we're actively exploring that with Jeff now, like where else are the pain points? What else do you want to optimize for? You know, one of the things we're looking at is, I think when you're scaling onboarding, you know, you're hiring 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people. How do you do that with humanity? And so we're starting to explore that potentially as a pathway for us, really helping people come into their new job with confidence, with insight about what they need to do to be successful, in a way that, you know, you can't possibly do at scale through people. So it's where can we play a role as technology as your friend for the candidate, for the new employee, and for the organization is, you know, going down that pathway.
Yeah, fantastic. How about you, Gordon? What do you see happening for Kallidus going forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, our goal is to make these integrations as smooth as possible for customers. So it's about enhancing our API to make that, you know, experience for the customers sort of seamless, so that we can kind of help them and enable them to kind of use the tools they want to with as little friction as possible. And I think that's key as we see more and more of these sort of tools emerging, you know, in all sorts of areas of that recruitment process. You know, organizations used to just be enterprise using that, but now it's all sort of the SMB, SME market looking to sort of take advantage of these as well. So that's what we're looking to kind of make a really smooth journey for our customers.
Fantastic. And final word to you, Jeff. From this journey that you've been on, what is happening next in terms of how you're evolving the recruiting culture in Iceland?
Our obsession with candidate experience is not going to stop. We will be looking to constantly improve that, and Gordon is probably going, "Oh my God!" You know, that's where it will be. We will look to consistently improve that. We will be looking at how do we utilize this technology far more across the business, and not just with our mass recruitment that's actually there. But another element that Barb and I have had some initial conversations about is about saying, is there a place for this particular product in terms of the bigger talent perspective? So not just about talent acquisition, but also about talent development. So, you know, in terms of the My Insights reports that you get, you know, it's a fantastic tool that would help our overall population of 32,000 employees at this moment in time to say, what is it that I need to work on, but also what are the real strengths and real positives for me? And, you know, if they're then considering moving on within the business, that then says, okay, can I be capable of more things? You know, the Insights report from a development perspective could really support that and could actually help to take things forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the connecting the acquisition of candidates to development of employees, I think that makes sense for both the technology partners here to think about. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, you three. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think we could absolutely spend more time talking about this. This is a story I think should be told to a larger audience. So folks, if you've enjoyed listening to this and you thought you've learned something, I would strongly recommend you check out some of the links that we're going to send you after this. It will basically be some case studies, some videos, basically an understanding as to how this happened and what the future might look like if you took a partnership view and a humanity first approach to hiring. Okay, that's about it, everybody. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure being your host. We're signing off right now, so have a good day and keep in touch. Hopefully we'll bring another one of these webinars very shortly.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks. Cheers, everyone.